My name is Calvin Jed, and for my final project for this class, I wanted to talk about this story that I've been working on for a while, share some ideas, characters, themes, my inspiration, things like that. Um, I've enjoyed writing this story. I feel like I've always kind of liked writing. I wrote little books and stories as a little kid. Um, I also love reading. I love hearing a beautiful story. And in in high school, my teacher had this banner across the whiteboard that said, "What is the power of story?" And she never once said anything about that banner. She never pointed it out, never asked us to consider the power of story or write about it or anything. It was just there for us to look at every day. And that question that she had, what is the power of story, is something that I've been considering, and that was definitely a big part of my inspiration for this story that I've been working on. When I look at a lot of stories, they're about something extraordinary. You've got the fate of the universe in balance, heroes are facing impossible odds, maybe there's magic or advanced technology or superpowers, or maybe there's some extraordinary scenario that wouldn't happen in real life. But part of what makes stories powerful is the chance they give us to escape from real life. So I don't think story has to be realistic to be powerful. Yet at the same time, we're all the main characters in our own stories. We're all creating our own stories as we go through life, and those stories are real. They're the most realistic stories out there, and they're not boring. There's conflict, there's drama, there's love, there's impossible odds, successes, failures, highs and lows, and I feel like the stories of our lives have all the elements of an incredible story, despite the fact that there's not magic or superpowers or anything like that. And that's why this story that I'm working on is the story of an ordinary person. It's a story that's been in the back of my mind for a while, and this class has given me time to think about it more and start to come up with some of the details and characters. I really want to show how interesting the story of an ordinary person can be and how valuable that story is. And that's kind of been my inspiration for this story. My working title is "I Used to Sleep in the Park," and as I explain more about the plot and the storyline, the reason for that title I think will start to make sense. First, though, I want to go over the characters, or some of the characters, and these are the ones that I have more fleshed out and developed. So, starting with Sarah, she's the main character, and I said I wanted this story to be about an ordinary person, so I see Sarah as um, not necessarily like there's nothing that immediately jumps out about her as being unique or especially unique or extraordinary. So she's just kind of a normal person. She's from I feel like she's pretty well adjusted from a stable family. She's kind of a rule follower. Um, I feel like I can relate to students well, and so she's a student in this story. She studies art, and she loves cats. She has, a couple at home. She's got one in her dorm, even though it's not allowed, and so I guess she's not totally a rule follower in that regard, which gives her a little bit more, um, less rigid of a personality. I see her as someone who's outwardly confident, maybe not so confident inwardly, and that leads to some of the problems that she has down the line. So then we've got Ty. He's Sarah's friend, kind of a low stress, easygoing person, always smiling. Studies art also, which is how he and Sarah met. I see him as an only child, which makes him a little bit more maybe anxious to make friends than he would be otherwise. And yeah, like I said, just kind of a gentle, easygoing person. Then we've got Ava. She is also Sarah's friend. She is she's ends up being kind of a bad influence on Sarah, and it kind of facilitates Sarah's decisions to go down a not very good path. I see Ava as kind of this self-indulgent, kind of like spontaneous, fun person who's a lot of fun to be around, but maybe doesn't really make great decisions. I see her as kind of having an us versus them or me versus them attitude, where she kind of puts herself first and prioritizes herself at maybe at the expense of others. Um, Stays up late. Yeah, just kind of definitely not as much of a rule follower as Sarah. Then we've got Gary. I see him as, his character is not quite as fleshed out as the others, but he's this older man, kind of resigned. He is a really caring person, although um, he maybe tries not to be. Maybe sees that as a little bit of a weakness, but it's still part of him. I feel like he's got a lot that happened in his past, and so he sees his life as kind of behind him. And then Sarah is going to show him that that's not necessarily the case. So we'll go through the plot here in the time that I have left. So the story is, like I said, it's about a girl named Sarah. She's a freshman in college studying art, and she comes from a supportive family, grew up in the suburbs in a nice neighborhood, in a nice home. She's really enjoying college, making friends. She loves her art classes. Things are going well. And that's the, oh yeah, so how I'm going to present the story is with this, the shape of a story graph. I thought that would be a good way to present it. So she starts out pretty well off and happy, and then pretty early on in the story, we'll kind of, after getting this, oh, do I have like a laser pointer? Maybe not. Aha, okay. After getting this part kind of established, she starts to run into some problems, and is faced with a lot of difficult things, and I haven't exactly decided what those difficult things are. Maybe it's, her parents getting divorced, maybe losing friends, maybe some health challenges, maybe all of those things. So she starts to make some bad decisions. She skips class. She stops studying. She's got this friend Ava that I mentioned who kind of facilitates these decisions, and eventually Sarah drops out of college. She kind of loses her friendship with Ty, as Ty stays a student, and Sarah drops out. And then she picks up some vices, and maybe just some bad habits and addictions, maybe, and these start to increasingly control her life. She ends up losing her job as well as dropping out. Let's see what doesn't work as well in the recording. Sorry, there we go. Yeah, so she ends up losing her job. She ends up, she's no longer in student housing, and she doesn't really have stable housing. She's maybe just sleeping on friends' couches, and she things have taken a bad, definitely a big turn for the worse. And Sarah is pretty unhappy at this point, but she still has some friends. She's got Ava, who, like I said, is not a good influence on her. She's got maybe some other friends, but so she's not totally alone, but she's at a pretty low point, and she just starts to get more involved in this kind of, this world that's very far removed from how she grew up. And then there comes a point when Sarah she keeps going down this bad path, basically involved in drugs and maybe crime a little bit. Her friends are more used to this kind of life, and I'm trying to figure out how to, yeah. Right now it sounds like kind of a leap to say this, but it makes sense in my mind. So hopefully it'll make sense when I eventually get it on paper. But yeah, so Sarah's got these bad friends, and kind of just, at a low point. We've established that. So her friends convince her to help them rob a convenience store, and Sarah's really freaked out about that. She's become pretty jaded at this point, and isn't as concerned about it as she would be, but she's still much more scared, much more reserved than her friends are in this situation. So they go to rob this convenience store, and then Sarah's friends are, a lot more brutal about it than Sarah is. They're, like knocking things off the shelves, threatening cashiers, yelling at people, things like that. And Sarah's been through rough things at this point, but she's never been around anything like this. So the group almost gets caught. They end up having to separate, and Sarah is so shaken up by this incident that she doesn't go back to those friends. She just kind of wanders around. She's, pretty scared. She's jumping at little sounds. She's expecting police to be waiting around every corner, and after hours of wandering around, she finds this kind of overgrown, disused public park and falls asleep there. And then, like I said, she decides not to go back to those friends. She ends up making her home in that park, and she sleeps there for months. She doesn't have a home, and she's away from that bad situation, with those friends and all of that. But now she's alone, and before she had a roof over her head and friends, and now she's alone and she's unhoused, and this is rock bottom for her. And it stays this way for a while until there's a big event that helps her break out. And I've played around with what that event will be. I see her as maybe she tries to commit suicide and someone saves her. Maybe it's just a realization that she has. But there's something that turns her around, and this is where Gary comes in, the character that I mentioned earlier. He is maybe the person who saves her. He's maybe just someone who helps her come to the realization that she can change. So she begins this gradual upward trend with lots of setbacks along the way. But Gary is helpful in that regard, and helps her on this upward trend. And I'm still working a little bit more on what this upward trend is going to look like, but eventually there's some decision that she makes that really helps her break free. And maybe that's, meeting her old college friends, maybe it's her family, but the story has a happy ending, and she ends up being better off than when she started, because of the experiences that she's had and the growth that she's experienced, and she's able to use those difficult things to be able to help other people. So that's my story. Didn't present it quite as well as, I don't know. I feel like it all sounds so great up here, and then when I present it, it's like I see that there's a lot of work to be done. But I'm excited about it. It's a story that has kind of been in my head for a while, and I hope to be able to show you the final product someday. So thank you.